Morning, dear students. Today we are going to discuss William Faulkner's most famous story entitled A Rose for Emily. First of all, let's discuss William Faulkner. William Faulkner was an American writer and Nobel Prize laureate from Oxford, Mississippi. Faulkner wrote novels, short stories, screenplays, poetry, essays, and a play. He is primarily known for his novels and short stories set in the fictional Yoknapatawpha County. Yoknapatawpha County is his fictional town based on Lafayette County, Mississippi, where he spent most of his life. William Faulkner is one of the most celebrated writers in American literature, though his work was published as early as 1919 and largely during the 1920s and 30s. Faulkner's renown reached its peak upon the publication of Malcolm Cowley's The Portable Faulkner and his 1949 Nobel Prize in Literature, making him the only Mississippi born Nobel winner. His famous works are The Sound and the Fury, As I Lay Dying, Light in August, and Absalom, Absalom. These are a few famous works of Faulkner. The Sound and the Fury is most famous out of these. The present story, A Rose for Emily, Faulkner describes the title as an allegorical title. This woman, allegorical means when two stories go hand in hand or side by side, main plot and the subplot. This woman had undergone a great tragedy, and for this Faulkner pitied her. As a salute, he handed her a rose. The word rose in the title has multiple meanings to it. The rose may be seen as Homer when interpreting the rose as a dried rose. Homer's body could be the dried rose, such as one that is placed between the pages of a book, kept in perfect condition, as Emily did with Homer's body. The rose also represents secrecy. Roses have been portrayed in Greek legends as a gift of secrecy and of confidentiality, known as sub rosa, implying that the rose is a symbol of silence between the narrator and Miss Emily, whose secrets the narrator keeps until her death. The present story, A Rose for Emily, is the first short story of Faulkner published in National Magazine. This story was adapted for film by Chabhak Cinema Company, one of the most frequently anthologized stories by Faulkner. A Rose for Emily is the remarkable story of Emily Grierson, an aging spinster in Jefferson, whose death and funeral drew the attention of the entire town. A Rose for Emily may be considered a tragic love story in the naturalist mode, a detective story, a thriller, and a typical O. Henry story with surprise ending. The story opens with a brief first person account of the funeral of Emily Grierson, an elderly southern woman whose funeral is the obligation of their small town. It then proceeds in a non linear fashion to the narrator's recollections of Emily's archaic and increasingly strange behavior throughout the years. Dear students, non linear fashion means disrupted, or when we don't have chronological order of the events. That is non linear fashion technique of narration. After the Civil War, the family falls into hard times. She and her father, the last two of the clan, continue to live as if in the past. Emily's father refuses for her to marry. Her father dies when Emily is about the age of 30, which takes her by surprise. She refuses to give up his corpse, and the townspeople write it off as her grieving process. The townspeople pity Emily not only after her father's death, but also during his life when he wouldn't let Emily marry. Emily depended heavily on her father, believing he would never leave her. He was all she had in her life. After her father's death, the only person seen moving about Emily's home is Toby, a black man serving as Emily's butler or servant, a cook, and a gardener. He is frequently seen entering and exiting the house of Emily for groceries. Although Emily did not have a strong relationship with her community, she did give art lessons to young children within her town at the age of 40. A prime reason why she gave art lessons was her financial problem, since she was running out of money. The townspeople make cruel comments and nasty looks behind Miss Emily's back as she wasn't respected in her town. With the acceptance of her father's death, Emily somewhat revives, even changing the style of her hair, and becomes friendly with Homer Baron. He is a northern laborer who comes to town shortly after Mr. Grierson's death. The connection surprises some of the community, while others are glad that she is taking an interest. However, Homer likes men and claims that he is not a marrying man. This draws attention to Homer's questionable sexuality in the story. It indicates towards his homosexuality. Emily shortly buys arsenic from a druggist in town, presumably to kill rats. However, the townspeople are convinced that she will use it to poison herself. Emily's distant cousins or extended relatives are called into town by the minister's wife to supervise Miss Emily and Homer Baron. Homer leaves town for some time, reputedly to give Emily a chance to get rid of her cousins, and returns 3 days later after the cousins have left. After he is observed entering Miss Emily's home one evening, Homer is never seen alive again. Despite these turnabouts in her social status, Emily continues to behave mysteriously as she had before her father died. Her reputation is such that the city council finds itself unable to confront her about a strong smell that has begun to come out or spread out from the house. They believed Toby was unable to maintain the house and something was rotting, unaware that a death has taken place. Instead, the council decided to send men to her house under the cover of darkness to sprinkle lime around the house, after which the smell disappears. The mayor of the town, Colonel Sartoris, makes a gentleman's agreement to overlook her taxes or to relax her taxes as an act of charity, though it is done under a pretense of payment towards her father, to assuage Emily's pride after her father's death. Years later, when the next generation has come to power, Emily insists on this informal arrangement, flatly refusing that she owes any taxes, stating, I have no taxes in Jefferson. After this, the council declines to press the issue due to her stubbornness. Emily has become a recluse. Recluse means a person who lives in complete seclusion or in complete aloofness or loneliness. That is recluse. She is never seen outside of the house and only rarely accepts people into it. Means she rarely allows people entering the house. The community eventually comes to view her as a hereditary obligation on the town who must be humored and tolerated. The funeral is a large affair. Emily had become an institution, so her death sparks a great deal of curiosity about her reclusive nature and what remains of her house. After she is buried, a group of townsfolk or of the townspeople enters her house to see what remains of her life there. Toby walked out of the house and was never seen again, giving the townspeople access to Miss Emily's home. The door to her upstairs bedroom is locked, and some of the townsfolk break down the door to see what has been hidden for so long. Inside, among the possessions that Emily had bought for Homer, lies the decomposed corpse or dead body of Homer Baron on the bed. On the pillow beside him is the indentation of a head, and indentation means mark of a head, and a single strand of gray hair that indicates that Emily had slept with Homer's dead body. The house is an indicator revealing how Emily struggled to keep everything the same in a frozen time period, avoiding change. In this story, A Rose for Emily, Faulkner does not rely on a conventional linear approach to present his characters' inner lives and motivations. Instead, he fractures, shifts, and manipulates time, stretching the story out over several decades. We learn about Emily's life through a series of flashbacks. The story begins with a description of Emily's funeral and then moves into the near distant past. At the end of the story, we see that the funeral is a flashback as well, preceding the unsealing of the upstairs bedroom door. We see Emily as a young girl attracting suitors whom her father chases off with a whip, and as an old woman when she dies at 74, as Emily's grip on reality grows more tenuous over the years. The South itself experiences a great deal of change. By moving forward and backward in time, Faulkner portrays the past and the present as coexisting and is able to examine how they influence each other. He creates a complex, layered, and multi-dimensional world. Faulkner presents two visions of time in the story. One is based in the mathematical precision and objectivity of reality, in which time moves forward relentlessly, and what's done is done. Only the present exists. The other vision is more subjective. Time moves forward, but events don't stay in distant memory. Rather, memory can exist unhindered, alive, and active no matter how much time passes or how much things change. Even if a person is physically bound to the present, the past can play a vibrant, dynamic role. Emily stays firmly planted in a subjective realm of time where life moves on with her in it, but she stays committed regardless to the past. That's all for today and have a nice day. Thank you. God bless you all.